My father was completely dedicated to one institution, the City College of New York, or as it was usually known in our house, the Harvard of the proletariat. From my earliest days, I often heard him sing, loudly and off-key, a song he claimed was the City College alma mater. It ran like this: "Don't send my boy to Harvard, the dying mother cried. Send him to City College so I can die with pride." But I didn't fully appreciate exactly what City College meant to him until a few years after he died. It was the late 1980s, and I was working on my PhD dissertation, but I had also started working full-time. And I was busy, I was traveling a lot for my job, and the degree seemed less and less important. And I was seriously contemplating quitting. My company was shutting down over Christmas and the university would be closed. So I decided it was a good time to take a vacation and think about what I should do. So I went to visit my mother. Now, whenever I visited my mother, I would end up cleaning closets, which was something she never did. And this particular trip, I tackled the closet in my father's study downstairs, which was full of a shelf of accordion folders that hadn't been opened in years. I spent part of that time persuading Mom that it was perfectly okay to throw away electric bills from the 1950s. But then I found an accordion folder labeled CCNY. Some of the contents were obvious enough: the program from his graduation, a copy of his transcript, in which I delightedly called up my brother to tell him that Dad's grades were not nearly as good as we had been led to believe. But there were also a few essays he had written in required composition classes, and one of them changed everything for me. In the essay, he wrote about a time in October of 1944, Yom Kippur, Landsberg Lager 4, Camp 4 at Dachau. He was 14 years old, and that night, he and another boy about the same age were assigned to one of the easier jobs there, carrying pipes up a hill where they were being used in the construction of an airfield. It began to rain, and the two boys were able to take shelter and actually stop working and talk to one another. And they began to talk about what it was that kept them going in these horrible circumstances. And my father wrote about the story he told his friend that night. His mother had always promised him that she would see to it that he would get an education. From his earliest days, she took him on the first day of Cheder, Hebrew school, and opened the book to the first page, to the letter Aleph, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and poured a little bit of honey on it and told him to lick it off so he would always know that learning was sweet. When the Soviet Union invaded Lithuania, and when he was 10 years old, they closed down the Hebrew schools, but she arranged for him to go to Yiddish school, to the Shalom Aleichem folk school. In another year, when the Nazis invaded and they were pushed into the Kovna ghetto, she found a tutor for him, well, not just one tutor to continue his studies in Hebrew, but another tutor to teach him English in case the opportunity might come for him to go to relatives in the United States or South Africa. The last words that she said to him when she was taken away to the Ninth Fort, that place that nobody ever returned from, were, "Son, if you can survive this, the best memorial you can make for me would be to get yourself an education." And he thought about that, and that hope of being able to fulfill that promise to his mother kept him going through all of the hardships. The two boys often worked together after that night, though they never had another opportunity to talk about themselves. 6 months later, Dachau was liberated, and in the chaos of the liberation and the trips through displaced persons camps that followed, Dad lost track of his friend. 3 years later, he was able to come to the United States. And one day he was walking in the Bronx, and he thought he saw somebody who looked familiar. He hesitated, but then he said to himself, this is America. You cannot be arrested for asking a question. And he went over to the man, tapped him on the shoulder, and asked, were you in 1944 or 1945 in Dachau or Landsberg? And the man said, yes, I was 81251. And my father said, I was 81250. And the two men stood on the Grand Concourse, embracing silently for what felt like hours, though it could have been only a few minutes, before arranging to meet for lunch the next week. When they went to lunch, the other man said to him, oh, Ephraim, it is so wonderful. I am a student here at the City College of New York. It is all free, and they say it is the best school. They call it the Harvard of the proletariat. But surely, Ephraim, you also are in school? And my father had to admit he wasn't. He had an offer from some relatives who would arrange for him to go to Detroit and stay with somebody and go to high school there. But he also had a fiancée who was pressing him to get a factory job and make money so they could get married. And he was torn, he didn't know what to do. But the other man reminded him of the story and his need to make a memorial for his mother. The essay ended there, but I knew the rest of the story. Maybe that made the decision easy, but executing it couldn't have been. He went to Detroit, and even though he hadn't been in school in 7 years, he was smart and he studied hard, and he finished high school in only 2.5 years. He came back to New York. He enrolled in City College, and he got a job as a file clerk at the United Jewish Appeal. His fiancée did indeed break off their engagement, but he met a young woman who also worked at the UJA as a secretary and also studied at City College. And their friendship grew closer as they took the subway to school together after work. And before long, they married. And then my brother came along, and Mom dropped out of college, and then I came along. Dad knew that it was important to read to his children, but between working all day and going to school at night, he didn't have a lot of time. So he decided that we were too young to know what he was reading, so he read to us from his textbooks. And my bedtime stories came from Introduction to Electronics and Principles of Cost Accounting for Engineers. One day when I was 3, he put on this strange robe and a hat with a flat top, and then we went to stay with my Aunt Frida, and when my parents came back to our apartment, they said that now Dad was a college graduate and we would be able to buy a house and have more money. Well, I thought about my father's education, and then I thought about my own. I went to good suburban schools. I had no interruptions from wars. When it came time for college, my father had created what he referred to as the Nadel Foundation Scholarship and Loan Program, for which the sole criterion was being a child of Mr. Nadel. And he even had stationery printed with his name as president and treasurer and my mom's as vice president and secretary. The only thing standing between me and my doctorate was just discipline. I went home and I buckled down and I finished writing in just a few months. The last words I wrote went on a page behind the title page, and they read, "Dedication, a memorial to my father." Thank you.